All right, so the game is the Battles of Rhode Island and Newport. This is from the GMT Battles of the American Revolution series. This is volume 9. I'm just doing a recap of this at the end of the game. So you can see there's a lot of empty map here. Everything's clustered at one end. Basically, historically, this battle was a kind of rearguard action for the American forces that were retreating in front of advancing British forces, because the French had decided not to support the Americans here and went to refit their fleet. I forget where they went, if they went to New York or Connecticut or wherever it was. It's recapped in the historical notes in the exclusive rulebook. But so this was the actual battle. The United States forces were kind of left on their own, instead of having the French infantry support and naval support that they were hoping for. So at the end of the game here, I am on the 12th turn, or just starting the 12th turn. The Americans won the initiative roll despite having a severe handicap at this point, as you can see here, their morale is wavering, where the British morale is fine. And there's a reason for that, which you can see here in the captured versus eliminated. Now, I did eliminate those British units, which is good. There's no eliminated American units, which means that they're worth, especially the two-step units, would be worth more victory points if they were eliminated as opposed to captured. But that's a giant stack of captured American units, and it's pretty much a hole at this point that the Americans cannot dig out of, with basically 3 turns left, one of them being the night turn. They are backed up at the very end of their possible salvageable victory points. This hex here at Butts Hill, this is the fortress. You can see there, that has the General Sullivan with his lifeguard and the heavy artillery. It is the final objective point, basically, for the British, and they are closing in on it. Now, it may look like, hey, there's a lot of American units there, and the British look kind of scattered around. There were times where it seesawed back and forth a little bit. The British, I would get too aggressive with the British and kind of leave them isolated and exposed, and the Americans would push back and counterattack. That's how you would end up with captured or eliminated British artillery units, which were eliminated by American defensive fire. So defensive artillery fire. So I was too aggressive with the British and moving their artillery up too close. The British shouldn't really do that because it almost gives the Americans opportunities to pick off their artillery, since targeting artillery during the defensive artillery fire phase gives them a DRM bonus. So you kind of want to avoid that. So really the British are the attackers in this case, and you really don't want to be pushing your artillery forward, especially, and this is something I learned as the Americans, along this line. I was a little further out here and attacked with American units that happened to be stacked with artillery and rolled terribly, and the lead unit had to retreat, and then one of the accompanying hex units that was part of the close combat failed its morale check and also had to retreat. But there were 2 American artillery units there, and artillery units never retreat when they're part of the attack. So I ended up with 2 exposed American artillery units that were by themselves in a hex, and so these 2 British units just moved right up, and if artillery is alone in a hex during close combat, it will simply be captured. And so that's why you've got a nice pile of American captured artillery up there, is because American units that fared poorly in the attack, even despite good odds, I'd rolled terribly, and ended up with a retreat result for the American units on the attack, which is not good if they're stacked with artillery. So if you are stacked with artillery and planning on attacking, seriously reconsider, because even even if you're on a 3-2 or 2-1 or 3-1 odds, you need to roll well. If you roll a 0 or a 1, bad things could happen, and you can end up with a lot of captured artillery. So, and this is a D10 system. You roll D10s on this, which I think makes for some pretty swingy combat rolls. The British typically had on the attack had 3-1 odds, 4-1 odds, and 4-1 is as high as the table goes. And sometimes would roll terribly. You roll a 0, and even with a +1 or +2 DRM, you're not going to have an ideal response. You need to get higher than a 2, basically, or actually higher than a 3 on the 4-1 odds table to get a positive result for the attacker. Anything lower than anything 3 or less on the 4-1 table is going to give retreat results for the attacker or a pin result. So if you roll low on a D10 system, even with super odds, you're screwed. So that happened a few times with the British. It's happened a few times with the Americans. You're always going for odds. This is it's a simple system. I will grant it that. There's not a lot of rules. The rules are a total of 14 pages. The 15th and 16th pages are charts and a sequence of play. So it's a simple rule set. It's a venerable system. It's been around for a long time. It's been refined numerous times over the years. It's very good, very clean system, but it is a very simple odds-based CRT that if you're making an attack at 1-1 or 3-2, you are, taking your life in your hands. I mean, on a D10 system, you can end up, even with a substantial DRM, +3 DRM, which is pretty rare. Anything over +2 is pretty rare in terms of combat modifiers because of the fact that enemy morale and leadership DRMs will negate whatever positive morale leadership DRMs you have. So it's a contested DRM close combat system, basically, and so you end up with scenarios where you're never going to usually have much more than a +2 on your DRM, and you may sometimes even be in the negatives, in which case, unless you're on that 4-1 table, and even then, it's questionable. So a lot of times, it can be very, very, very swingy. So you think, I'm just going to blow through these guys. I'm like a 6-1, so which translates to a 4-1 combat resolution. I'm good. Then you roll a 0, and you realize, even with a +2, I'm still screwed. So it is very swingy on a D10. Nonetheless, I think this kind of turned out not necessarily historically. I don't believe historically it was a decisive victory for the British because I don't believe they took Butts Hill. But basically this was the Americans just a rear guard action, kind of running skirmish combat. How it starts is the Americans have some advanced units kind of along the middle of the map here that are not subject to any movement restrictions, so they can kind of organize themselves however they want. All the units that are back here kind of along the main American forces are restricted in their movement until turn 5, I believe, for some units, and then turn 7 releases all the units. So what you want to do is make sure the British don't get all the way up to here, before turn 5, basically, which is pretty tough. I mean, it's a long movement, and even using roads, it's tough for the British to get everybody up where they need to be. My problem was I got greedy with the Americans. So initially I kind of advanced too far with some of the British units. So I thought with the American rearguard force here that I would be able to pick off some British units. And indeed I did. I killed, a valuable unit here. But I ended up getting the entire American force captured, like all of the rearguard American forces. This is most of the rearguard American forces, and then a few artillery units that were picked off here. They all got captured along with the leader. That's terrible. you do not want to leave these guys out here to get captured. It will put you in a victory point hole from which you will not be able to escape. So what you want to just keep doing is just withdraw, skirmish where you can. If you can pick off something, fine. But otherwise, you really just want to slow the British advance while maintaining the coherency of your units. You don't want to let people get surrounded, and that's what happened here. I let the British are advancing along kind of two axes here, and the Americans are defending the two axes. And what I let happen was I kind of tried to pull some of the Americans up here, and that allowed the British to get around behind and surround units, and then they had nowhere to retreat when they got bad combat results, which led to capture. So that was the problem there. You want to make sure you have avenues of escape for all these units along here, because, again, you can't let that many units get captured, or it's going to be bad news. So, yeah, lessons learned. But I do like this system. Surprisingly, I have not played. I have all the games naturally, but I have not played any of them except for, and I'll show you the rest of the series over here. I have only actually played Saratoga out of all these games that I have. So I did learn the system that way. GMT has been good about, they've released this, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, released a combined box that had the 3 first games in the series, which they had reprinted a second edition of Saratoga, but Guilford and Brandywine were very hard to find. Had only been printed once, never been reprinted, so they were long out of print. All the rest of these are out of print, and I believe how GMT is going to do it is to do more of where they're combining the 3. So these may be the next 3. They get combined into a box. That's the one big complaint, and then here's the newest one here, White Plains. The biggest complaint about this is that they're single battles at a time and released as their own box. So that makes reprinting things very difficult. What GMT has started doing to reprint a lot of these old single battle box games is to bundle them together with other games in that series. So you can see they have done that with the Musket and Pike series. This dual pack combines the first 2 games of the original Musket and Pike series, which were long out of print, hard to find, expensive. So I think what they're going to do is continue that, and so they'll combine the next 2 box games into another combo pack. They've also done this with the Men of Iron series, where this was, the original Men of Iron, Infidel, and Blood and Roses. They combined it into one box, and then as more Men of Iron games come out and then go out of print, they may do that as well. And I think there are plans to do it additionally for the Great Battles of the American Civil War series, with the long out of print 3 Days of Gettysburg, River of Death, which I don't even have. That's the second version volume in the series, which is on Chickamauga, and then Red Badge of Courage, like combining these into multiple boxes as well. So I think that's a good trend for GMT to help people get some of these old out of print games, but that are from good systems that are very highly regarded, but become expensive because they've been out of print for so long. Combining things together is very helpful, and I think a positive step for the wargaming community. So the reason that I played Rhode Island was not out of any particular interest in the Battle of Rhode Island in this case. It was mainly because Rhode Island has the unique distinction of being like the worst cover and box art that GMT has done in the whole series. If you look at these characters on here, they're like 3D rendered, like from a bad like 1990s era 3D rendered video game, like just astoundingly bad box art. And then this kind of muddy, like, poorly scaled, like those guys aren't even to scale against the fortifications they're standing in. It just a mess of, and then this kind of blurry, oh, hey, there's some ships. Don't forget there was bombardments that happened, and let's just put a flag on there to show that those are British ships, even though the flag's not like related to the ship that it's shown on in any way. Just miserable, horrible mishmash of 3D rendered art and nothing that's historically related to the battle. The exclusive rulebook has a picture on it that, you know, I'm guessing this is something from the Battle of Rhode Island, like maybe a historical painting or something. I need to look at the credits. I don't know if there's credits in the actual book or not, and then explain what this image is. If this is like some sort of historical rendering from the Battle of Rhode Island, I don't know. Hopefully it is, because that would make sense. You know, and then there's, I think this is actually the image that's been on the other covers of the books. But, you know, just use some historical imagery. Don't, you know, try and mash together some sort of weird 3D rendered mess of a cover, and then like the coloring on the side, like they used, you know, the graphics there. Oh, Battles of the American Revolution, Volume 9. Yeah, that's normal. Like the font and color there is normal, but the color is totally off. So let's see what you get. Like, all of this looks nice on a shelf, you know, it all fits together. And then we'll put in Rhode Island, and oh, look, it's a completely different color. Like, yeah, they got the flag in there, they got the stars in there, GMT logo, whatever. But like, just, you know, I don't know. That's the kind of stuff that really just grinds my gears. And the same thing, like all the great battles of the American Civil War have nice, consistent box art. And River of Death, if I owned it, would fit right into that. And then you get the latest edition of it, Into the Woods, the Battle of Shiloh. Oh, look, it is Great Battles of the American Civil War. Doesn't say what volume it is. Totally different color. Yeah, no style, like just completely different artwork. Just the kind of thing that for shelf display obsessives like me just drives me freaking bonkers. So that was actually why I decided to play. You know what? I'm going to play the Battle of Rhode Island because I hate this box so much. But of course, it's a fine game. The system is good. The game is good. The only complaint that I have about the Great Battles of the American Revolution is that each of these individual battles is its own box, and none of these battles really, I mean, even the biggest battle of, in this case, the biggest battle of the American Revolution was Brandywine. Even the largest battle, like of the American Revolution, does not really warrant its own boxed game. These are small, they're all small battles. Even the big ones are still small compared to something like Civil War battles. These things can be easily combined, and, you know, GMT is doing that, combining them into one box. They really should be combined into one box, yet GMT is still releasing new ones as individual games. You know, and I'll keep buying them because I'm a series obsessive, you know, OCD. But they really don't need to do that. None of these battles are really large enough. They do have, of course, plenty of historical detail in them. The great thing about these games is that things like the counters, you know, the maps have wonderful, you know, art design on them that are period appropriate. The counters have individual unit art on them. The leaders have individual photographs, or, you know, not photographs, but actual, you know, period images of those particular leaders if they have them. But, you know, you have different, all the units look different because they all would have been wearing different uniforms. So all the counters have appropriate period uniforms on them and stuff like that. So, you know, the production is great on all these. The cards have, you know, period appropriate artwork on them and stuff like that. So all that stuff is great. But, you know, none of these are really large enough, in my opinion, that they need, that they should be individual boxed games. These are like magazine games almost in terms of just the size and scope of them. And you can combine multiple of those into one box, really, and still achieve the same result. So anyway, that's just a look at the Battle of Rhode Island. And this does include Newport as a whole separate battle, and actually, frankly, larger battle. It's counterfactual, it never happened. It's a what if kind of battle, but it is actually bigger than what the historical battle was because it would have included, had it happened, would have included all the French forces that were available. So I have yet to play that, so I don't know how it works out in terms of a, true counterfactual study of what might have happened. But I do look forward to exploring that too. The game, in my opinion, was quite enjoyable, despite the, of course, irritating aspect of the box art on it. But those are minor complaints. Obviously, anybody buying this is going to be more concerned about the gameplay than they are about the box art. It's only the weird box art obsessives like me that find that stuff even worth commenting on. So anyway, that is a look at the Battle of Rhode Island from GMT in the Battles of the American Revolution series.